Cam Jordan has high expectations going into the 2023 season. The Saints defensive end said that he expects the Super Bowl and that, quote, I expect to take Derek Carr back to Vegas and have a return run to the Super Bowl. This is then NFL Network Now on the Westwood One Radio Network.
You have an invention idea but don't know what to do next? Call Invent Help today. We have representatives nationwide who will explain the Invent Help process step by step. Over 10,000 patents have been secured through Invent Help patent referral services. The Invent Help data bank includes thousands of companies who have agreed to review new ideas. We've been helping inventors since 1984. Let's help you next. Get started today.
Call 1-800-217-4380. That's 1-800-217-4380. Again, 1-800.
All right, welcome in, everybody. It's Sports Daily on a Thursday. Thursday's always a lot of fun here on the program. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you until 11 o'clock. Chad Chambers producing. Coming up a little later in this hour, our betting insider, Chelsea Messenger, joins us. Wonder if she has any NBA draft betting tips, but we'll get the latest from Chelsea. In that world, we'll also have our buddy Tim Fitzgerald, our K-State insider, sort of our conference realignment insider, coming up at the top of the next hour. Excited about that conversation as well. Excited for you to join the conversation. The IHOP hotline is wide open for you. 869-1240 is that number. We're here with you. Glad to see you on the video stream as well, which you can always find on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. You can go back and listen to the show on the Odyssey app. All kinds of ways to join us here and take it all in. Lots of stuff coming up on the show today. We'll talk TBT. We get the bracket released, and this may be the best Wichita regional, the best, of all the great ones we've seen, this may be the best. We'll get into that a little bit. Of course, the NBA draft tonight. We'll talk a little bit about that, what we expect, where we would like to see Grady Dick go more specifically. Tyreek Hill is indeed in trouble after a Father's Day incident. We get more information on that as well. All coming up for you. All right. Welcome in, everybody. Tommy, how are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to the NBA draft tonight. Of course, you mentioned Grady Dick, but I'm really interested to see if Jalen Wilson is going to get drafted, where he's going to go. Even Craig Porter Jr., been doing a lot of workouts for various teams around the league. Will he sneak into the second round? There's a lot of really intriguing storylines coming up tonight.
Yeah, it's the NBA draft, the NFL draft, Tommy, is the best because we generally know all the players, right? Because we saw them play college football. The NBA draft is always tricky. It went through a phase of tons of international players. Never really see them play. Went through a phase of tons of high school players, right? Never really seen them play. Now, some of the top prospects play in the G League. Again, nobody watches the G League, so we haven't seen them play. So it does get a little tricky. Now it's this blending of things a little bit. When two of the top four projected picks are playing in the G League and you've never seen them play, it makes it hard. And quite frankly, we've seen it now with Victor Wembanyama, but, we haven't seen him play college basketball either. So it is sort of a mixed bag in the NBA. I think tonight, when you've got trade rumors surrounding two megastars in the league and Zion Williamson and Dame Lillard, that's going to add some intrigue as well. I'll tell you what, though, my top storyline here is I'm beginning to have some concern for Victor Wembanyama and just how big these expectations have gotten. I don't think that we've seen a prospect get this type of hype since LeBron. And there have been some that, flirted with it a little bit, but not like this. And there's always potential to not live up to that hype. And I have some fear, right, that we're overdoing this a little bit. Again, we don't go like this very often. And it's been 20 years since we did it for LeBron. Is there any chance like this hype is too much with Victor Wembanyama? He seems like the kind of dude that can handle it. He says the right things. The good thing for him is he's been playing pro ball now for a while. So that's certainly going to help him and help us mitigate some of that risk. But man, like I hear people talk about him as some, combination of LeBron and Durant and Steph Curry. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's first see if Victor Wembanyama can be Victor Wembanyama and what that is. Because right now, I can guarantee you he comes into the league and they're going to go bully ball because he's a skinny young kid. Like they're going to try to rough him up. Like you're going to have to see how he handles that a little bit. But he's apparently the next big deal. And like when I say big deal, I mean big deal. Like not just a top prospect, but one of those guys.
Well, you asked if there's a chance that he doesn't live up to those expectations. Sure, there's always a chance. I mean, for your LeBron James, I can show you a Greg Oden, as far as not living up to expectations. Like it does happen. Is it likely for Wembanyama? Probably not. I mean, there's a reason why I think everybody is fairly unanimous about his NBA prospects to be a superstar in the league. We've had high expectations on other players before. I think of Zion. There was a lot of expectations for him going into the draft. There were expectations for Anthony Davis when he was drafted. We do this occasionally. I think what makes this one a little bit different is the fact that he is an international player and we don't have a ton of idea. It's not like we're consistently watching him play basketball. We've just heard his name, and what he's doing overseas. And then within the last few months or so, really understanding the kind of basketball player that he is. So, I mean, sure, there's a chance that he doesn't live up to expectations. I don't think it's likely. I think my concern more than anything else is just by looking at his body and the way that he's built would be an injury.
Well, yeah.
Risk. That would be the biggest thing for me. Not necessarily that he's going to come over and not play well. I think he'll play great in the NBA as long as he can stay healthy. That's my only concern with him is just by looking at him. I look at him and I'm like, man, to me, that looks like a torn ACL or, some kind of like bone spurs or like, the things that we see with guys that are that height, usually the kinds of injuries, that would be the only thing that would concern me about a long NBA career.
Now he moves a little bit differently than some guys that have been plagued by that stuff. I will say that, he's taller than both, for instance, Dirk and Jokic as far as international players, but he's thinner now. But that, Dirk looked kind of like that when he came into the league. And I don't know how you could not, right? Like, how do you keep up with a body that size? It's going to take some time into your adult years, but it'll be, I don't fear that as much as I did with like Greg Oden. And you brought up Greg Oden. Man, I remember when Oden got taken over Durant. And like, it's just like, if you watch these guys play basketball, like everyone was in love with Oden because he was a shot blocker. And the NBA went through this at the top of the draft. Like everybody all of a sudden loves shot blockers. Like that's all fine and dandy. But if you're going number one overall, you better be able to score and score well. That's the bottom line with this. And I think he's going to be able to do that. He is a mix like we haven't seen before. One, because we just don't see very many players that are 7'5", right? Like Yao Ming and then some just burly centers that can't really move. He's different than that in that way, and that's awesome. You do see him explode like he's about 6'5", right, is what it looks like, and he shoots, clearly. His shot looks like Dirk Nowitzki. So I get the blending of things, but when you try to place those type of expectations, it's tough, man. And LeBron lived up to it. He absolutely obviously has. LeBron is wired a certain way. That's the one thing we don't know about Wemby. How are you wired? Are you wired to shoulder that sort of expectation? I'll say this. The absolute best place he could have ended up is San Antonio for like 1,000 reasons. You get with Pop. You don't have the media circus, although he'll probably draw one anyway. It won't be as bad as it would be just about anywhere else in the NBA. I mean, that is I heard somebody yesterday, I think it was on the Zach Gelb show here on KFH, compare it to San Antonio is sort of like a college basketball town. Like Pop's the guy. Like, in college basketball, we revere these coaches as much as we do players. That's sort of how San Antonio is, and that's going to be good for him. And I've heard interviews with him where he was like, I think San Antonio is a perfect fit for me too, which of course he is going to say that. I just we got to be careful. I hate placing that type of expectation because it almost leaves no room for anything but disappointment. Like, what is even meeting expectations for Victor Wembanyama right now? Like, what is meeting that? What's just doing what everybody expects him to do? Because it sounds like everyone expects him to step in, be an all-star, and take the Spurs to the finals. I don't think any of that's going to happen, right? Like, he might make an all-star game because of his hype right now if he plays well. But we have to allow some wiggle room to come in and struggle a little bit, to adjust a little bit. Let's have the conversation in 2 years and 3 years instead of in the first game. It concerns me a little bit because I don't think there's any room for anything. Like he can't exceed expectations because they couldn't be higher, right? Like there's almost no way he exceeds them, which only leaves one other, I suppose, two other possible outcomes. He either meets them or he doesn't meet them. And it just is, it's too much now. And I hope he does well. I think he's going to be incredible. I hope he's incredible. But I am concerned a little bit because we don't live up to the hype in the NBA at the top of the draft very often.
I think it's really important to separate what kind of expectations we're talking about. If we're talking about individual expectations and the kind of game that he plays and the stats he's going to put up and all of that, that's one thing. Then we talk about the team expectations and what he can do for the San Antonio Spurs. And can he make them contenders? Can he get them to the playoffs and, teaming up with Pop and all of that? I think those are two separate things, right? And so, we see it all the time. Zion Williamson has put up some really good numbers in his short time in the NBA, the couple of years he's been in the NBA, but it's not like he's really turned his team into a contender because I think a lot of times, more often than not, and we saw this with the NBA champions, we see it with the Nuggets right now. We see the Suns trying to load up on talent. We see the Celtics making a big trade last night and getting Porzingis on their team to have another weapon. It's more than just one guy. It's more than just one player. And you and I, when the Spurs won the draft lottery and got Wembanyama, we went through their roster. We didn't recognize a lot of names on that roster, right? So I think that those are two separate expectations. And sure, Wembanyama can play a large role in getting the Spurs back to the playoffs, but he can't be the only guy to get the Spurs back to the playoffs. So I think that it's going to be important that, whether it's this year or not, in future years, the front office, the GM, RC Buford, they're going to need to try to find ways to surround Wembanyama with, the talent that will work well with him to get them back to the playoffs. And then you can have a conversation about the individual expectations and the team expectations. But I think that if you try to combine those two, that's probably why a lot of times we say, players taken at the top of the draft don't usually exceed expectations. Well, I think we put too much on their shoulders. We put more than just their individual stat line. We think if you're taking number one or number two or whatever in the top 5 in the NBA draft, that you're automatically going to make the team that you're going to a contender. Oftentimes these teams are terrible, and that's why they're picking so high in the draft, and it takes more than just one player to get that done.
It's going to take that with the Spurs. There's really not much else there. I mean, they've got some players, like you mentioned. We looked them up, and their stats are okay, but I don't know who these guys are.
Yep.
And
that's why I think you have to be able to make sure to temper not the individual expectations, but with Wembanyama, build in that, okay, it's not just a one-man show. You've got to have some other pieces to get back to the playoffs.
You know what's interesting about that too, though? Maybe there is room for him statistically to do some things because there's not a lot there. I'm just looking back at the number 1 picks and I'm trying to gauge it on hype, not so much like in the aftermath of success. And, LeBron and the other guys that had crazy hype was, Dwight Howard the next year did. Derrick Rose did. I don't think Blake Griffin had that kind of hype. He actually probably had the best numbers as a rookie. John Wall, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, I think you're right, had some of it. Then you had Anthony Bennett, Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, DeAndre Ayton. Zion's probably the guy. I think you were right when you said Zion and Anthony Davis. I would probably mix in Dwight Howard there as a guy that had this crazy hype coming in. And that's, Wiggins had some of it, honestly. I mean, Wiggins, I remember before I even followed KU, it was right before I got here. Wiggins was getting the LeBron comps. But not like this. And so there have only been a handful of guys. And quite frankly, Anthony Davis and Zion Williamson in their rookie years both lived up to the hype. Zion's biggest problem is he can't stay on the court, but his numbers as a rookie were better than LeBron's, arguably, as a rookie. So I hope that we can just hang tight and see it play out. What made LeBron so great early on in his career, it wasn't necessarily the numbers he came and put out as a rookie, because guys have done that. It's a little bit later than his rookie year when he started to take teams to the finals that were not good. That's where we started to be like, goodness gracious, LeBron. Like, some of those Cavs teams were not good at all. Like, they were bad. And so that's where his greatness came. And that's where Wembanyama's greatness, if he really is this kind of prospect, like, I don't really have much doubt he's going to put up some numbers. But if he's that kind of prospect, that's what it's going to be. Like, when we get into year 3 and year 4, are the Spurs contenders at that point? And that's what we'll have to pay attention to. So we'll see that with him, I think, a little bit later on. Let's just give it time to get there, though. He's the number 1 pick. There's not even a debate about it. The debate sort of comes in who goes to right now. Scoot Henderson, who we haven't really seen play at all, and Brandon Miller, who if you watch college basketball and follow college basketball, you know everything about, right? The off-the-court legal concerns, all those types of things, and what kind of player he is. Scoot Henderson, as a 6'2" point guard, some scouts you read, like, he is a really good prospect, like a really, really good prospect. Could end up being, in some world, the best player in this draft. I mean, it's not, I don't think nobody would bet that, but I think he's probably underrated as a prospect, but he's not a great 3-point shooter as a point guard, which concerns me in the NBA. At least he wasn't in the G League. He shot 32% from 3. Which is, I mean, I guess that's all right. What did Grady Dick comes in as a 40% shooter and one of the better shooters considered in this draft. So it's not that far off that. I think when it gets to Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller, Tommy, it gets tough because Miller has what happened like it exists, but it almost exists as something. Is it a concern as you go into the NBA? That's what I'm having a hard time on the Brandon Miller, because it was such a bad situation that he's been in no real legal trouble for. It's almost like, is this something you have to watch as like a possible, are we getting into the potential of this happening again? Look at what's going on with Ja Morant. Like, what happens and how much can you play into that? And that I don't think you could ever get a feel for until you had conversations that we as the public will never be privy to, ever. That's what makes it interesting.
And teams are absolutely going to do their due diligence, not just on Brandon Miller, but on every player. And they do it every single year. They've got, all these different things that they do to try to make sure that they are making the best investment possible. And that's certainly what this is, right? When you're drafting players, you are investing in them and your team's future. And so what makes it difficult is that I would say that if the Ja Morant situation had not have happened, this wouldn't have been and wouldn't be nearly as big of a concern for teams with Brandon Miller, because the Ja Morant thing is fresh in everyone's mind. And this involves a firearm with Brandon Miller.
Both situations involve guns, right? And
I do think that I think that it would be fair, and I wouldn't blame teams at all for having a little bit of pause before they want to jump all in on Brandon Miller. And then it wasn't just the situation. It was, if you think back to after the event happened and Brandon Miller is going through the player introductions and he's doing a gun hand signal deal when he's being introduced. Like, there were some other things that happened that I think And I'm not saying that you don't draft Braden Miller. I would understand teams having an appropriate amount of concern about drafting him.
It all comes down to personal conversations when you're talking about an 18, 19-year-old kid. Like I almost always pause when criticizing bad decisions made by an 18 or 19-year-old kid, because I made lots of bad decisions as an 18 or 19-year-old kid. Most 18 or 19-year-old kids make bad decisions, and decisions that if you looked back on them, you'd be like, what in the hell was I thinking? So I want some room for that with him too. It's just like, without being close to him, it's hard to know that, again, when we're trying to guess when a guy's going to be drafted. So we have to look at it that way. And the other hard part about it is none of us have seen Scoot Henderson play. Like, if you watch the NBA G League, more power to you. But like, nobody does, right? And so that's also what makes it really difficult, because I think if you're the Hornets, you have to just take the best player, right? Like, they're not in a position to be picky here. You can't afford to miss on the best player. If you evaluate one of these guys that much further ahead of the other guy, you have to just take the best guy. I don't think they have a lot of wiggle room. So the real intrigue early in the draft comes with the Hornets at number 2. And then for us, it really gets into, at that point, Grady Dick watch, right? Like, where is Grady Dick going to go? Because he's pretty universally considered a top 10 guy. And I'll tell you, I think he's a candidate for a team to reach on. I'll tell you why a little later in the show. Let's come back. We'll bring in Chelsea Messenger. We'll talk a little betting with this. Much more coming with the NBA draft as we make our way through the next 2 hours as we get ready for the draft tonight. It's Albracht and Castor at Sports Daily. Betting talk next.
and give us your thoughts.
It's absolutely crazy.
316-869-1240. This is your home for sports. 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Oh, okay, take it easy. We're going on the air.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
On the line is the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider, Chelsea Messenger. Insider calls are presented by BetMGM. Go check out all of the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. Also, be sure to check out the Daily Tip podcast for more of Chelsea Messenger analysis. Just search BetMGM wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, and we welcome back into Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor, Jad Chambers producing for you. Chelsea Messenger joins us now. We always appreciate Chelsea's visits in the summertime. We look for creative ways to bet. Of course, Major League Baseball is always on the slate. I wonder, Chelsea, when we come to events like tonight, I don't know how to bet the draft other than guessing where guys go, but it is fun sometimes to just get a little action on the hot topic of the night. We all know that adds a little flavor to it. Do you find yourself interested in anything with the NBA draft tonight?
I don't think so, because it's an information-based market, and so many of these things can change dramatically throughout the course of the day. We know the NBA offseason has plenty of fireworks, and I wouldn't be shocked if we have one more big-time trade that goes on before the NBA draft transpires. So you have to know that going in. I do think the way that maybe you can capitalize on the can't-miss prospect that seems to be Victor Wembanyama is right now he's minus 165 to win Rookie of the Year. It feels like a very short price. If all of the articles that I have read on this guy and how he could be better than LeBron, better than just about anybody who's ever played the game of basketball, wouldn't you say minus 165 for Rookie of the Year is a solid play? Obviously, he needs to stay healthy, but he's going to a team that is definitely going to use him. The Spurs need a star. Also has a great head coach, Coach Pop. We know has trained some of the best centers, in the NBA. David Robinson, Tim Duncan. So I think if anybody can coach him up in his first year, gotta be Victor Wembanyama, Rookie of the Year.
Are there some other angles that, we can look at as we're getting into the NBA draft, like potentially players that, we think might be drafted in the top 10 and getting some odds on whether or not they will be, or maybe first round picks versus second round picks? Is there anything in there that you feel like would be an interesting way to go about betting this draft?
I'm going to say no, just because this is not my specialty. I'm not an NBA draft person. Like I find it interesting from a betting angle, but like I said, I don't have any inside sources. And here is the bottom line: when you are betting, you have to feel like you have some edge over the sports books. Right now, I feel like my sources are not better than the sports books. They see all of the information that's available to the general public, so it's built into the numbers. So unless you were anticipating for a team to make a trade and they haven't yet, and maybe that switches up the order of something, like I know people are saying that the Miami Heat are lurking, they might make a trade because they definitely want to add another piece to what they have. I think it's a stay away market for me.
All right, let's look elsewhere then in the sports world. Chelsea, baseball has been interesting. We've got all kinds of different things happening. Where are you focused the most right now in late June?
Yeah, it's got to be baseball. But here's an interesting thing. Your Kansas City Royals, I guess that's the team that you guys would claim, are on the opposite end of being the largest underdogs, I think, of the past couple weeks. Today, the Tampa Bay Rays laying minus 350 against the lowly Royals. But here's the thing about baseball. It's not a game that's won on paper. We know the worst team in baseball can be the best team in baseball on any given day. We've seen it with the Rays going against the A's, but it's not a play I would recommend today. In fact, I'd go the other way. Shane McClanahan, the ace for the Tampa Bay Rays, will go under his earned runs today. Under 1.5 earned runs. It's plus money, plus 110 against this Royals offense that I don't have to tell you guys. It's been pretty pathetic to watch. Bottom 5 in most statistical categories. Shane McClanahan's hit this number in 8 starts already. So he has dominant stuff going against one of the worst offenses in the league. I'll go under 1.5 earned runs for Shane McClanahan, starter for the Tampa Bay Rays.
And it's crazy too in that, Chelsea, because I'm looking at it right now on BetMGM, and I don't remember seeing this before. you're getting basically even money to give them plus 2.5 runs, not 1.5, 2.5 runs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it goes in some of these really heavily juiced plays. You can still get an alternate run line if you really want to, but it's especially juicy. And here's the thing about taking big favorites at home on the run line. You've got to think of how baseball games are played. And if the Rays are up, say you have them minus 2.5. If the Rays are up 2 runs going into the bottom of the ninth, they're not going to play the ninth inning. So for that reason alone, I don't really like playing the run line on home teams that are the favorites.
Interesting. Okay, so I know that some of that too. And by the way, going back to what you mentioned about the Royals, we reluctantly claim them just because of how bad they are this year. But obviously playing the Rays and going up against Shane McClanahan, I understand why the line is the way that it is. Some other matchups today around Major League Baseball and some of the pitchers who are on the bump today. Mitch Keller is on the bump for the Pirates. He started the season really hot, has cooled off over the last few weeks or so, but he's on the bump for the Pirates. Looking at like Joe Ryan is pitching for the Twins. Are there any other pitching matchups for today's games that you're looking at being interested in?
As far as pitching matchups go, not especially. Even though the Braves and Phillies one should be a good one with Bryce Elder going against Aaron Nola. Bryce Elder has flown under the radar, but one of the better pitchers on the Braves staff. But I think it's tough because you would think, okay, you're going to play an under, right? Not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say. These are two of the top offenses in all of baseball, so that kind of takes me off of that one. I think the play I like the most is the Yankees and the Mariners game. I'm going to take the Yankees on the money line. Also like the under here. One of the hottest trends in all of baseball has been the Yankees unders at home. You always think, okay, the Yankees, power hitters, right? They play in a short porch. There's going to be a lot of home runs. Not the case. The Yankees this season, 25-15 to the under this year when playing at home. So going against the Mariners, who are also a team that has trouble getting going on offense, like the scores of their last 3 games have been 4-2, 3-1, and 1-4 because they just don't have a ton of run production. Both these teams are in the bottom 5 of WRC plus, all the predictive metrics. But I'll go with the Yankees. I think their starter is a little bit more dependable here. With looking at Domingo Germán, who 6 of his last starts, he has allowed 2 runs or fewer. Meanwhile, Seattle has a guy going that's only made 3 starts in the major league. So like the Yankees today and also the under.
So when we talk about baseball, and we talk a lot about pitchers, but hitters, there are all kinds of props all the time. And it's interesting, and I wonder if there's ever any value in going to look at who's hot, because we know baseball is streaky, right? Do the markets ever catch up with that? Like when you're looking at it, if you went back and said, okay, who's got the most hits over the last week, or who's the hottest player? Are the markets so caught up that they're in tune with that, or do you think there's ever any values to try and ride a hot streak like that with a hitter?
I think if it's a relatively unknown hitter, sometimes, because like you're never getting value on guys like Aaron Judge. Like you're not going to creep up on anybody. Obviously, he's on the injured list right now, but still, you get what I'm saying. Somebody who's been really hot, surprisingly so, is Aaron Hicks for the Orioles. We all know he was a strikeout machine with the Yankees. Somehow a change of scenery has really helped him. He's hitting over 300 in his last 30 games. Orioles aren't playing today. I think when you're looking for hit props, you immediately go to the highest total on the board and which is the best environment for hitting because it's just a larger sample size and maybe you fade bad pitchers. But the problem is baseball is so finicky to where you can have a guy fly out at the wall and you don't win any money. Like he's seeing the ball correctly, he's right on it, but I'm not really big on hit props for that reason.
Chelsea, we know that, there are several teams in Major League Baseball that at different points in the season have gotten really streaky. The Oakland Athletics were that team a couple of weeks ago. Right now, it's the Cincinnati Reds on an 11-game winning streak. Is there a good play, you think, with the Reds? Is that a team that you can ride for a while, or should you start to fade them just because that win streak has gone so long?
Yeah, the Reds are for real, in my opinion. Right now, they're 3-1 to win the NL Central behind the Brewers, who are plus 125. I have a lot of faith in the Brewers. I was on the Brewers last year, and they were winning the division, but yet still made some questionable trades to trade away some of their players who were actually good. So it's not a team that I trust their ownership to make the right moves. And meanwhile, the Reds, I think they're going to be buyers at the trade deadline, which is crazy to say. That's the other thing you need to consider when placing some of these futures bets. Is this team going to be a buyer or a seller at the trade deadline? So if you're thinking, hey, the A's won 7 games in a row, yeah, but if they have any good players, they're probably going to the trade block. So they're going to get even worse after the trade deadline. I don't think it's going to be the case for the Reds. I take a swing on them at 3-1 to win the NL Central.
Chelsea, I'm going to have a little story time with you here. So my dad and I have 2 wagers on the Texas Rangers, $100 each, one for the grownups and one for like a college fund for the kids. So $200 bets out there at plus 5,000. The cash out options right now are at almost $350 each. Now, there's zero chance I'm going to cash that because I'm too much of a gambler when the potential winnings are 5,000. But at what point, like, do you begin to think about that with some of these long shot bets, like winning a World Series, as hard as that is?
I think that is the goal of most people who are betting, as a means of income, because I think that's why you play the futures market. And that's why you take some of the long shots, because you will have some hedging opportunities down the road. I think if it's a fun bet, and if it is just one single bet where you don't have other options on the table, I think you ride with it. If you are betting for fun, go ahead and have fun. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. I do think at the start of the season, if you're looking to make some money, I think that's a good way to play it, is to play some of these long shots. Even if you don't think they're going to win, you will have good hedging opportunities down the stretch if they can even get in the picture when it comes to winning the World Series, winning the Super Bowl, or whatever.
I mean, we've got 2 of them. Maybe the way to go is to consider doing one of them one way and one the other, I guess. But the Rangers, I'm going to tell you now that even with DeGrom out, the Rangers look for real, and we know they're going to buy at the deadline. You in with me? That's the team. Mm-hmm. So we the Royals we claim here. I'm a Rangers fan, but do you like their chances?
Here's the thing about the regular season and the postseason. It's 2 different types of rosters that you need to be successful, because you can be a great regular season team and you won't win a World Series, because the postseason's so different, because you can really rely heavily on your top 3 pitchers. I don't know if you've been watching the College World Series. It's very similar to that. It depends on the guy that's throwing, but in baseball, it's not, a 5-game rotation. You are riding your top few aces. So I think if you have the shutdown aces who can shut down the best lineups in baseball, that's where you put your money on when it comes to World Series winners. Regular season bets, you can beat up on the worst teams in baseball. That's fine. And I know the Rangers have the best run differential in baseball right now, but my question is, if they go to a World Series, do you trust in their aces to deliver in the biggest of moments? And I'll say this about Eovaldi. He's already done it. He's done it for the Red Sox in the postseason. Has been especially huge. But I think the questions come, to the other guys. Who is it? John Gray, some of their other starters. Martin Perez.
Yeah, Martin Perez is there. He's been pretty good. It sucks that DeGrom's out. It's not going to suck as much now, but that's sort of what they were banking on, right? Is to have DeGrom in that spot. They didn't really care, I don't think, what he did in the regular season at this point. But they're also going to go. You talked about going on the trade deadline. They're going to push all their chips into the table. They spent way too much money this offseason not to. I think they'll go get the top starter. I mean, I think they'll try anyway.
They should, because the window, you know how it is in sports. You got to strike while the iron's hot, and your window can close, the very next year.
Chelsea, we appreciate it. Any other bets we need to make today that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I posted this one on my Twitter. Right now, NFL Comeback Player of the Year, DeMar Hamlin is minus 350. How does he not win this award? If he steps foot on a football field, who is taking Comeback Player of the Year away from the guy that didn't he literally die on the football field and they brought him back to life? Who has a better story? So I know it's minus 350, but it feels like a pretty safe play.
We'll keep our eye on Breece Hall. He's from Wichita on something like that. That will be an interesting one. Let's keep that in our back pocket and talk about that. That's an interesting one. Chelsea, we appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we'll do it again next week.
Thanks for having me.
That was the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider, Chelsea Messenger. Insider calls are presented by BetMGM. Go check out all the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. We'll come back. We'll talk more about the NBA draft. We'll get a little bit into the TBT as well. Tim Fitzgerald coming up at the top of the next hour. It's all coming for you on Sports Daily on a jam-packed Thursday. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily, Albracht and Castor here with you on this Thursday edition. So, Tommy, yesterday, as we set up a giveaway here, we rolled out Blueberry Summerade and the Summer Breezer at East. The Breezer is. Let's give away a little iced tea here today. We'll give away 2 free iced teas for HTO. These will be good for West or East. You can try that Blueberry Summerade. Jad will get us a winner, 869-1240. It's what you think it is. It's a take on some blueberry lemonade. It's fantastic. Check it out at HTO, East or West, 13th and Tyler West, 127th and 21st East. First caller, Jad will get us a winner there. It's you know what I did yesterday, Tommy? We went to, when I got off work, we went out and checked out the new Andover Park by the Andover Central Park, I guess, by the Capitol Federal Amphitheater.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, that new park is fantastic. Have you guys been out there yet?
Yeah, we take our son there quite a bit. They've got kind of like the turf down with all the playground equipment and all that. It's great. I will say I wish that there were some more trees out there, because when you're right, like summertime, like you're right in the playground equipment, it gets awfully hot, but it's a fun place. Our toddler loves it, and we go out there all the time.
So we love the library. So we were just making our weekly library trip for the kids, and we're like, you know what? It's nice outside. Let's go over there and play. But it also shows off that great amphitheater and Odyssey, KEYM, bringing you concerts in the park, which are sponsored by IHOP. That's free live music Fridays from 8 to 10. It's right there at that park we're talking about. You can go out there and play on the playground for a little bit and then just cruise over and catch a concert at the amphitheater. It's all right there in the same area. It's over at 1607 East Central Avenue in Andover if you haven't been out there. So this Friday, it's across the pond. I've heard them. They're a lot of fun. You can bring your lawn chairs, blankets, extra cash for the food trucks that'll be out there. No coolers. The gates will open at 6:30. So go out there and check that out. That area is really cool. They got some fishing docks out there now, it looks like, and it's a good time out there, and we're glad to be a part of that free music on Fridays. There is nothing.
Whenever I was just going to say real quick, whenever we go out there and take our toddler, we always have to make a point to go and say hi to the ducks. Like, that's his favorite thing to do. Go down to the water, say hello to the ducks. We have to do that every single time.
If you say hi to the ducks, what do you say to the geese, though?
Get out of here. Good riddance.
Yeah. Geese are, we've probably talked about the disdain for these geese. They're so selfish and mean, and they hiss at you and do all these things. It is baby goose season. And so now there's like these gaggles of geese that run like 20 deep, and the babies are getting almost as big as the adults. I had this as I was coming home from school, dropping my son off at his school today. There's like 20 geese crossing a busy road, and you got to like stop. And that part of it is so sweet. And you're like, oh, look at that. All these geese crossing the street. It's like one big happy family. And then they turn into adults, and they turn into turds, and you're just like,
they're awful.
Yeah.
They're awful. I hate them. So you asked me what you say to the geese instead of saying, you say hi to the ducks. What do you say to the geese? I think we'd have to have the delay button, go, the dump button going. I've said some choice words to geese before. They're pretty awful.
You're not going to hurt my feelings. Look, sometimes it's self-defense with those things. They're not very nice. Congratulations to William for winning that HTO. Let us know, William, what you think of that new summer flavor. We'll come back. We'll have hour number 2. Tim Fitzgerald joins us top of the next hour. We got a deadline looming I want to talk to Tim about. We'll do that next in conference realignment. We'll get more into the NBA draft on Grady Dick, and the TBT brackets are out for Wichita. All coming up. Hour number 2 of Sports Daily. The IHOP hotline will be open. And the second part of that hour, 869-1240. We'll be right back.
Sports Radio 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. It's Albracht, it's Castor here with you. Okay, let's take a look, Tommy, as we track down Tim Fitzgerald at this TBT bracket that comes out. So we knew that the Aftershocks and that Mass Street, which is the KU alumni team, were going to be in. You know, we didn't know if the purple and black team was in because they haven't been real active on social media since like January. We thought they might be. We didn't hear anything. Well, the brackets come out. And yes, indeed, there is a purple and black team. There's also an Arkansas alumni team and a Mizzou alumni team, and they're all going to be in Wichita, and it is going to be fantastic. I think this may be the best setup for Wichita that we've seen in this tournament.
It's really exciting. And the fact that you've got all these fan bases that can just converge into Wichita, and knowing that you've got the Shocker faithful here, you've got the KU fans, you've got the K-State fans. You would imagine that people are going to travel in, to see these different, schools. And then, of course, you add in Arkansas to the mix as well. And you know what? There are a decent amount of Arkansas fans in Wichita also. I think it's going to be so much fun. I can't wait for it.
And Trey Wade is on the Aftershock team, and it'll be interesting since he also spent a little time in Arkansas. I don't know. So they have some guys on that team. They're not like needle movers just yet on Arkansas. But so what I did was, so the K-State, which is purple and black, we've seen them for a few years. They haven't been super active, but I believe that if you go to their official TBT page, we can see some roster. And the reason I think this is updated is because Marcus Foster's on there. Marcus Foster didn't play for them last year, did he?
I don't know.
And Mike McGurl's on there. I don't think either one of those guys played for them last year, and those guys are both listed on the roster. So I'm going to assume what's on the page now is an updated roster for this team. So DJ Johnson, who's been with them for a long time, as has Henry Walker and Thomas Gibson. Those are some recent guys, but McGurl's added, Marcus Foster's added. Justin Edwards is there. Kamau Stokes, Cam's on there too.
Oh yeah.
So it looks like, and Jacob Pullen is still listed there too. So that should be another addition. We'll talk more about the TBT coming up. But right now, speaking of K-State and the alumni team in purple and black, let's get to our buddy Tim Fitzgerald.
He's got all the insight on what you want to know and maybe some of what you don't want to know. Here's K-State insider Tim Fitzgerald.
All right, Fitz, just while we're on it, circle the date on your calendar. I don't know if you saw this, but the TBT tournament this year here in Wichita is going to have Wichita State alum, K-State alum, KU alum, which is a loaded roster, an Arkansas alum team, and a Mizzou alum team. So we'll see you here, drinks on us, in about a month for the TBT.
Yeah, that's turned into such a cool thing. I mean, it's just grown so much. It's just an amazing idea that has actually taken hold, and all these old guys are having fun playing in it.
And if nothing tells you how much this state loves college basketball, this tournament does, because they just like explode attendance out the doors of everywhere else this tournament's played here in Wichita. Okay, Tim. So I want to sort of go in reverse order, and we can talk a little bit about K-State specifically as we move along. But I'm the most interested in this realignment stuff. San Diego State has stumbled sort of here lately to a potential finish line, and June 30th seems to stick out. We've heard that, you've reported on that date for the Pac-12. That's sort of the date that matters for San Diego State. What do you think the chances are in 8 days on June 30th, whatever the explosion is, happens?
I'm beginning to wonder. Yeah, I've been saying June 30th because that's what everyone else was saying. Now they're talking about the start of media days. For the Pac-12, which is later in July than the Big 12. I just can't fathom what kind of deal they have that is taking this long to put together, that it's going to be competitive with, the other conferences, comparable to what they had or better. I can't understand this at all. And now the San Diego State move is truly baffling because they put themselves in a position where they could end up having to be independent, but I think they're probably going to end up in the Pac-12. Even if it's weakened, they'll make more money than the Mountain West. But man, what a chaotic, just jumbled mess, and it comes from a lack of leadership from the Pac-12. And I'm not just talking about the commissioner; I'm talking about the presidents and chancellors who haven't demanded better from their conference. They're guessing numbers on projected budgets because they need these numbers and they can't provide it.
Do you think that in this entire process that San Diego State overplayed their hand a little bit? I mean, it's sending that letter to the Mountain West and then the Mountain West interpreting it as an official notice they're leaving, and then they're kind of backtracking and saying, no, we're not officially leaving. And do you think that they've overplayed their hand?
Yeah, a little bit, but I would also guess that they're very confident that they'll be in one conference or the other. Or they're also confident that even if they screwed this up, they're so valuable to the Mountain West, they'll take them back. If I'm the Mountain West, I probably hold my line, even though there's some value there. I don't know what they were thinking. I think they just got so eager for this to happen. They wanted to tell someone, and it just, why do you send a letter that isn't really a letter? That it's just the worst breakup I've ever seen. It's just, golly, I'm really, guys, I really am kind of speechless because I have no idea what's going on out west. It's just such a mess.
So I wonder, is the Big 12 interested in San Diego State if they don't have clarity on Colorado and Arizona? Then, and I only ask that because as a one-off, let's say, because San Diego State shot themselves in the foot, and now they have their own June 30th deadline. If the invitation's not there yet from the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 doesn't have the deal, would the Big 12 swoop in and offer an invite without the other West schools already lined up?
No, I don't think so. Maybe. I just really, I think they need at least one. I would suspect that everyone thinks Colorado's going and San Diego State will replace them. But let's recall that San Diego State and SMU are going to replace USC and UCLA, so maybe they've walked away from that plan. Maybe SMU is involved in this June 30th too. They've just played it a little bit better with the American. I'm not sure. I know that the Big 12 had a lot of interest in San Diego State. San Diego State naturally was interested in the Pac-12 first because and that's always been their aspiration, and it's their neighborhood, so to speak. Even though if they lose some Four Corner schools of the Big 12, there won't be much of the South left. So, if all things being equal, the Big 12 got San Diego State on a big discount. They would take $10 million in rights fees for a few years. Yeah, they might do it, but I don't know, guys. This is bizarre, truly bizarre.
Yeah, you mentioned Colorado, and it seems like there's a new Board of Regents meeting every few days or every week or whatever. Where do things stand? I mean, I know clearly they're waiting on whatever this rights deal deadline is for the Pac-12. Have you heard any rumblings that might be new from the last week or so coming out of Colorado?
No, I haven't. You're right. I'm glad I'm not on the Colorado Board of Regents. I should have a lot of silly meetings scheduled and canceled and scheduled, and it's kind of chaotic. They have gone into executive session. They say it's about track and field or something, but you don't know. They're in executive session. So at the end of the day, I think Colorado ends up back in the Big 12. I just can't see this number for the Pac-12 being competitive, and we're hearing a number that is about 10 million less than every Big 12 institution. And if they want to stay together for 10 million less, more power to them, because that'll spell the end of the conference, particularly if their exposure with their media rights isn't very good. If they're doing a lot of streaming that people can't find, or just don't think to go look for, they're just in huge trouble as a conference.
Tim Fitzgerald, publisher of GoPowerCat.com, joining us here. We're talking a realignment. So, if the Pac-12 deal's not that, this San Diego State thing got real interesting to me in all of this. I think we all like San Diego State as an option if it's a part of a Western expansion in totality. I don't think anybody doesn't like that. But I feel like there's an opportunity here. If you like San Diego State, if you're the Big 12, if you like them, because if they face that much of a burden on June 30th and the Pac-12 doesn't have a deal and they have some decision, right, that they have to make by June 30th, can the Big 12, in the details of this deal, because San Diego State's not a Power 5, I guess it becomes more about, can the Big 12 convince the networks that San Diego State's worth the expansion? Because that's what it would come down to, right? If they can't, if you can't get the network to sign off on them as like a full financial member, which is always going to be a problem for them, then it's going to be tricky for the Big 12 to offer an invitation at this point.
I agree. I totally agree. I've had mixed sourcing on this. Some people believe that San Diego State, as part of a bigger realignment, Colorado and Arizona would come in full price. That the networks have said okay, and same with UConn. But I've also seen a lot of reporting that is the opposite of that. Again, just the whole chaos of this whole situation. If you get to June 30th, let's back up though. Let's look at something. If you're the Pac-12, how are you negotiating media rights, but you don't know who's in your conference?
Yeah, I know.
That's not possible from everything I've been told about how the networks come to a number. I mean, literally by calculating the value of the institutions and what they bring. But you don't know if you're going to be 10 or 9 or 8 or 12. I don't understand how they can even be negotiating a contract without these things in place and everyone absolutely ready to sign the grant of rights, which is a whole another thing. You can sit there and say, yeah, we'll sign it if the deal's good, but that doesn't mean they're going to sign it. It means that they haven't told you what makes a good deal for them, and that would probably be Oregon and Washington. I don't know how any of this is, all these pieces fit together into a contract being announced anytime soon, not just June 30th or July 20th, whenever their media days are. Anytime soon. If you don't know who your members are, who's paying you what? Why would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in one of these situations, I mean, I guess my big thought on all of this is that the clock is clearly ticking, right? I mean, we're getting closer and closer and closer to this quote unquote deadline. But I mentioned it the other day on the show, and I want to get your take on this. Do you think that the Pac-12 and that, their commissioner Kliavkoff is kind of selling these schools a bill of goods right now? Like, it's kind of a bait and switch. Like there's all this speculation on a rights deal and the deadline is there. Do you really think that, like, the emperor has no clothes, that there's really nothing on the table?
Well, nothing that they could sell to them as adequate. I mean, because if they had that, they would do it.
Right.
I think I brought it up in a daily delivery recently, one of my videos, that I honestly believe the Pac-12 leadership, presidents, commissioners, and presidents and chancellors and the commissioner have been gaslighting their own fan base. They have actually been deceiving them through useful idiots in the media. Because how many times have we seen them or heard them say, we're going to have it by this date, by April 15th, by this date. And then they don't have it. And then they make fun of Big 12 media for predicting defections at that time. And we're totally based on them having a media rights deal. They can't have a decent number at this point and be sitting on it. That makes no sense. You would want to get it out there and add some clarity to this. But when I saw Kirk Schultz at Washington State completely fabricating numbers for the future of a media rights deal and projected budgets and awkwardly trying to explain these numbers in the strangest display of hand signals I've ever seen in my life, I knew they were in trouble, because he's been heavily plugged in and he still can't explain what's going on. So, this leadership issue in the Pac-12 is long-standing, and it's not because of the commissioners. It's because of the people that hire the commissioners are just unable to make sound decisions when it comes to athletics. And that's a big problem with the Pac-12. They're just as not in tune with college athletics, and they don't have the rabid fan bases like other conferences do. You've got some, Oregon is certainly one, and Utah's another, but a lot of these places have a lot of empty seats in big stadiums.
Tim Fitzgerald, publisher, GoPowerCat.com. All right, let's talk a little about K-State. NBA draft tonight. Is Keontae going to get drafted, do you think?
Yeah, I think by the end of the second round, he will be drafted. He wouldn't have stayed in if he didn't feel pretty confident in that. I'll feel bad. I think he's an NBA guy. I think he's more of an NBA player than a college player. I think he's built for the NBA game. And he has such a casual way of scoring. It's kind of like watching an NBA game, to be honest. You get through the game and then you realize, Keontae had a double-double, and I didn't think he played that well. That really fits the NBA, being able to just kind of, gear down a little bit, because you got 82 regular season games and still put up some points and rebounds. It's impressive. I'm keeping my eye on Marquise. I don't think he'll be drafted, but I do think someone will immediately offer him free agent contract, because I think there's at least one franchise that's enamored with his possibility. Let's be honest, he's not only a great player, but he would be an attraction. People might want to come see him do his thing. So I'm interested in both.
Well, if you don't have interest, if Fred VanVleet is the top free agent on the market right now, and that doesn't tell you guys like Marquise Noel have a place, then I don't know what does.
You're right.
I'm with you. Feels like a guy who can make an impact 2-3 years into the league, perhaps for a contender, and that's when it becomes like hopefully the best landing spot. NBA draft tonight. What about football? Anything interesting? I know Jerome Tang's talking like maybe right now, so we'll react to that a little later. But what about football? Anything interesting for Cat football right now? This is a bit of a strange time of the year. I see most people who put out their Big 12 preseason rankings are putting them usually number 2 behind Texas. Is that kind of what you're feeling, or did you fill out a poll, and where did you put them?
I kind of stuck with my early summer predictions in the poll, and I think the Big 12 championship will be Kansas State and Texas Tech. Now, the advantage Texas has in the round robin of the 3 schools, Texas has both of them in Austin, and Kansas State has both of them on the road. But I think at the end of the year, Texas is going to Texas, which means they're going to stumble a couple times and lose some games that they probably shouldn't. So I think K-State's the team to beat. I just really like what they have coming back. Are they complete? Do they have questions? Absolutely. But when you got a veteran offensive line, some really sound pass rushers on defense, and a veteran quarterback, man, you're going to be okay. You're going to be pretty good.
Fitz, one last thing from me. I know it's not directly connected to Kansas State, but there is that connection there. And I know we talked about the previous incident a few weeks ago, but Bob Huggins obviously out at West Virginia after the DUI over the weekend. Your reaction, your take on Huggins and his tenure overall in college basketball, and the fact that we probably more than likely won't see him on the sidelines ever again.
It's a really sad situation for me because I love Bob Huggins, and anyone who's gotten to know him through the years appreciates him. His exterior doesn't reflect what he is, but we also, anyone who's been around him knows he's a heavy drinker, and a very big man. I mean, he absolutely dwarfs me. And when we heard about the DUI, I think a lot of us were like, okay, maybe he had a few drinks and, barely got over the limit. No, I mean, 0.21 is significantly drunk. And to be operating a vehicle, the family's trying to claim he had recycling in the car, which sounds ridiculous. But then they claim, who hasn't done this? Well, that's not a good argument at all. I mean, that's an awful argument. I just feel bad for him that it ended this way. It's embarrassing, but boy, I hope he gets help, guys. I hope the university and his family put some pressure on him to, try to, even if you don't want to admit you're an alcoholic, to at least lessen up and make better decisions. Lessen up your drinking and make some better decisions. But it sounds like the family is, from his daughter's post, not interested. Nothing's wrong with dad. So it's I don't know where this ends, unfortunately.
Do you think he'll coach again, or do you think that's the end of his coaching?
I think it's the end of his coaching. I think someone will give him an opportunity to broadcast because he is so entertaining. They got to turn his mic way up to make sure they pick up his little growl. But, again, if he's got a drinking problem, you can't show up on any set with any alcohol in you. I mean, that's just not how it works. So I'll be interested to see if he does have an opportunity to do some, broadcasting. I saw a online petition nearing 15,000 signatures from West Virginia fans, to try to bring him back. And I'm like, what are you folks doing? I mean, this was his second chance, his third chance after the radio, and now he's done this. You just can't. At some point, you got to be more worried about the man than having him as a coach. And he's going to do something to kill himself or other people, or drink himself to death unless they get him on a new course.
Well, we will, we hope for the best for him too. All right, Fitz, what do you guys have going at GoPowerCat.com right now?
Well, apparently it's podcast day at GoPowerCat. We put up our weekly questions podcast where we answer K-State sports questions, and then also my guy Ryan Wallace, along with Kevin Flaherty from the 24/7 recruiting staff, and Michael Swain, who runs the KU site, put up their second edition of their Sunflower State football recruiting podcast. Those are both up right now. We'll have whatever's going on with Tang a little bit later. We'll stay on top of stuff. It's a slow time, but between our podcasts and this realignment stuff, it's not very slow at all. So we'll stay on top of it. And football's nearing. Like I said, Big 12 Media Days is like 3 weeks away, so I'm prepping for that.
Well, we'll talk about it. Tim's going to join me as well on CBS Sports Radio nationally coming up on Saturday. We've got a shift there, so we'll get the latest on conference realignment, maybe preview the Big 12 football season just a little bit. So I'll talk to you Saturday, Fitz. Invite everybody to join that. Until then, we'll talk to you here next week.
Okay, boys. Thank you.
There goes Tim Fitzgerald. Let's come back. Let's get into Grady Dick before we run out of time. Where do we want to see him land, and what are the chances he could elevate and go higher than people are expecting, which is within the top 10? So it's already high. We'll get into that Coming up on Sports Daily.
Curtis Daily. Go!
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor joining you here on this Thursday. A lot of great stuff. If you missed anything with our betting insider, Chelsea Messenger, with our K-State insider and sort of realignment expert, helper, predictor, whatever you want to call it in that world, because it's crazy, Tim Fitzgerald. You can go back and listen to that as well, all for free on the Odyssey app. It podcasts things out for you. It's super easy. Tommy, let's number one thing, let's tell people that the IHOP hotline is back open. Let's give away some Wind Surge tickets too. You can go see them on us. Call in for some vouchers, which are good for tickets to any game, anything of your choice. It's courtesy of us here at Sports Daily and KFH. We'll do that now to the first caller. Wind Surge vouchers. Jad will get us a winner as we begin and continue to talk about the NBA draft. So we talked about the very top. Tommy and Tim gave us some insight on the K-State guys. Let's talk about Grady Dick here. So Grady Dick, by most accounts, is a top 10 prospect, lottery pick. I see CBS Sports has him going to the Magic, which I think would be really cool, at 11. I think Grady Dick has a chance to be somebody, Tommy, that a team, goes a little ahead of that because, one, he can help you pretty immediately, and his floor is pretty high because he's a great shooter. What I'm curious about is the NBA fully aware of just how athletic he is? Now, he didn't need to do that for KU necessarily because they needed him to play a certain role. But I do think his ceiling is pretty dang high, and his floor is as good as anybody in there because he'll always be able to shoot. I think there's a chance somebody goes and gets him a little more aggressively because you're almost certain he can help right away, and then the upside's also there.
He's the best pure shooter in the draft, bar none. That there's not another player that is a better overall shooter, in my opinion,
we know about, right? There's another French guy that's apparently a great shooter, but we don't know him, right?
Yeah, and so I think that's a known quantity, right? And I think that from a talent perspective, we see Grady Dick as a top 10 pick. That being said, though, a lot of it comes down to need on the teams, and that's where a lot of places have him projected going to the Magic at number 11, right outside the top 10. But I do think, and I agree with you, I think that there's an opportunity for a team maybe somewhere between 7 and 10 to rise up and grab him, a little bit early. I'm looking at the odds right now, and right now, and I kind of like this bet. Grady Dick is plus 220 to be a top 10 pick. So I think that it's getting plus money for him to go inside the top 10, which I like that because I know that he's being projected at 11, but I do think there is that opportunity for him to sneak inside the top 10.
I think the Mavericks are a prime opportunity at 10 if they stay there to do that, by the way. That's really interesting. I may join you on that one. Just a fascinating, player because I think, and it all comes down to is his upside that we know is there that really came more at Sunrise than it came, I think, at KU. Is that a known commodity in the NBA, right? That's what it's, because I think everybody agrees the floor's safe with Grady Dick, but I don't know nationally if people understand just how athletic he is and explosive he is when that's what he's asked to do, as he did at Sunrise, where we saw him play some of the elite players, right? He was always the best player on the floor, playing some of the best players in the country. That's where it really gets interesting with Grady Dick for me. And the other component to it is when you talk about a team like the Mavericks or maybe the Magic or even the Pistons, who feel like they're maybe on the fringe of taking that next step, does he fit there to help them do that more than maybe an unknown commodity? Like right now, CBS has Taylor Hendricks as I had no idea Taylor Hendricks was being considered that way from UCF, by the way. But they got him as a top 5 pick. If I'm the Pistons, I'm taking Grady Dick 10 times out of 10 over Taylor Hendricks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest question for Grady Dick, and I don't know if it is a question right now, but it certainly was a question during his time at Kansas, was how good of a defender can he be? And I think that he grew in that regard during his time at Kansas. Where I mean, watching, if you went back and you watched film of him at the beginning of the season with Kansas and then at the end of the season, I think you would see a pretty solid development on the defensive end of the court from Grady Dick. Does that mean that he is an NBA caliber defender? I don't know. Maybe. But I think that's going to be a question for teams that, of course, everybody knows his shooting prowess and what he can bring to any team in the NBA with shooting the basketball. But those other aspects, being able to be a solid defender in the NBA, I think that's really where the question is.
Maybe. And that's the thing. Like he needed to be that kind of shooter at KU, right? Like that's what he needed to do because they had Jalen Wilson as your volume guy. It'll be fascinating to see him tonight. I think he's one of the most interesting players in the draft, not because he's interesting to us, obviously with the local ties, but I just think his, where he goes is all over the place, right? I think the possibilities are endless for him. To where we see him play. I don't know. Once we get to him, because I'm curious on Brandon Miller like everybody else. Keontae George has some appeal to me. I'm curious to see where he goes. I just, who else moves the needle for you? I think our local interest does have some of the more interesting players in this draft because I think Marquise Noel is really interesting. I think that Keontae Johnson is certainly interesting. But who else moving the needle for you tonight where you're like, I can't wait to see where this guy goes because I think he's going to be a good player?
I mean, I think further down in the first round, there are names that stand out to me just because of, the teams that I follow in college basketball. I tend to, just because of the proximity, or I guess fairly close proximity, I kind of keep an eye on Iowa a little bit. Chris Murray is in the draft, and he's projected as a late first round pick. You mentioned Keontae George at Baylor, the Big 12 guy, so keeping an eye on him. We heard a lot during the last season about Jalen Hood-Schifino at Indiana and what kind of NBA prospect he would be. I think his stock has fallen a little bit from, I don't know, a few months ago to now, where at one point I remember there was conversations about, him potentially being a lottery pick, and he's kind of fallen, looks like projected into the end of the first round. So there are some names that just because, I'm a college basketball guy, I follow it. I'm not really paying close attention to the G League guys or the international guys. It's mainly the players that I recognize from college basketball.
There's 3 French dudes projected into the first round by CBS Sports. Don't know what that's all about. When did France become a basketball powerhouse?
What about another Imani Bates, by the way? I think Imani Bates is an interesting name because, remember, he was at one point a really, really highly touted, NBA caliber prospect. And there's been drama that's followed him, for the last couple of years. And can he find his way now onto an NBA team? You want to talk about a guy whose stock has fallen? That's another name I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, the stock risers or fallers is always interesting, and it'll be a good night. I think it is. You got, I always love watching where the great college players that don't necessarily like Jaquez of UCLA. Like, where's a guy like that going to end up? Is there anybody, because those are going to end up being the guys, right, that have the biggest impact for playoff contenders most likely. And who's going to be that? Is there any rookie, that ends up on a good team that could put them over the edge? I think that also becomes interesting. That's where a guy, by the way, like Keontae Johnson, I think comes into play. To some degree too. Like, can he put somebody, because I think he is that kind of player, right? Like, who is a great basketball player that could come in and fill an immediate role and help a team win a title? We saw it out of Christian Brown, right? He's the perfect example of that. Like, maybe he doesn't fill up a stat sheet, but has a massive impact for a team and helps put them over the edge. The Spurs used to be the kings of that, right? The Spurs would always go find somebody late in a draft, and it felt like it was a great college player or an international player, but that stepped in immediately and had some impact on them.
Well, watch Denver. I mean, of course, they took Christian Brown at 21 last year. They've got a handful of picks late in the first round and then into the second round. What about, this might be wild, but what if the Nuggets decide they want to go after Jalen Wilson? And then you've got Christian Brown and Jalen Wilson potentially together on the team. I could see a second round pick going for Jalen Wilson. So I think that's an idea for sure, where, you've got Wilson's versatility potentially being an asset coming off the bench for the Denver Nuggets as they try to defend their NBA title. I think that there are a handful of players that are like that's really what makes the late first round so interesting to me, because then you've got teams that, they're looking for that one player that can get them over the edge, potentially contributing to help them, in the playoffs and beyond. I want to go back to, I mentioned him a couple minutes ago, Emoni Bates, and I had forgotten all of the hype around him as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated being compared to Kevin Durant and being compared to LeBron. And, went to Memphis briefly. Just really we talked about the hype around Wembanyama at the top of the show. There was a lot of hype around Emoni Bates. He was like the number one guy for a long time. Now he's projected in the second round. I'm not sure if the skill set has diminished or if just we had overhyped him before and now it's kind of coming back down to an accurate level. But imagine the skill set is still there for Emoni Bates. If it is, I mean, he could go in the second round and be an immediate contributor to an NBA team.
You brought up something with Memphis. Memphis gets all these prospects. And I'm trying to think, like, in Penny's time there, because Wiseman didn't really play, are any of these guys ever really developing into big-time NBA players? Penny?
I mean, Bates was only there for a year, and then he transferred to Eastern Michigan, found himself in, some legal trouble. And you go all the way back to his time in middle school. I mean, he was the guy. Remember, he got an offer, I think, to DePaul when he was like in 7th grade. So I don't know. I mean, I think that the allure is there to go and play for a guy like Penny Hardaway, but I'm not sure the development is typically there. By the way, did you see Penny is suspended for the first 3 games of the upcoming season because of recruiting violations? That just came down in the last 24 hours.
No, I did not see that. How long is that going to last? Because, I mean, if you're Memphis, you keep him obviously because he brings in these good players, but they haven't translated to wins. They're not developing into NBA players. I wonder how long that will stay the case, as there are other places where guys just become factories almost. I hadn't thought about that at an NBA perspective until you brought up Emoni Bates. And of course, Wiseman's the guy that would jump to mind, but he didn't really play there anyway. He was hurt,
right?
Or suspended. He was suspended or whatever it was. I don't even remember now.
So Hardaway suspended 3 games by the NCAA. Apparently, the panel announced that the violations are tied to 2 in-home visits in 2021 with a recruit from the high school class of 2023 who was referred to by the NCAA as a highly rated men's basketball prospect. Hardaway said he was unaware of the rule that he had violated. The panel said that ignorance is not an excuse. They're suspending him for 3 games. That was reported, yesterday by Jeff Borzello.
That's pretty interesting. A topic for another day for sure. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll hit that TBT announcement yesterday. We'll look at the Wichita bracket and begin to look ahead at that as we get the news, just as we went off the air yesterday, of what the regional will look like. It might be the best we've ever had here. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline is open. What's your Grady Dick prediction tonight? We'll come back. More Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. Congratulations to Jeff, who's going to see the Surge or the Turbo Tubs, if he goes on a Thursday, on us here at Sports Daily. Congratulations to Jeff. All right, Tommy, the TBT, it's coming to Wichita. We mentioned this briefly at the top of the hour, but you've got the Aftershocks in Mass Street, which we knew, and those rosters are going to be a ton of fun. You've got the reunion happening with the Final Four team, the 10-year reunion with the Shockers happening sort of away from the tournament, but at the same time as the tournament. We know Fred and Ron and Wessel and Takale and Early are all going to be there. We also find out yesterday that Purple and Black is not only back, but playing in Wichita. And then we see that an Arkansas and a Missouri alumni team come in. And then you've got all the other, teams. There's actually a Memphis and a Temple team, which might be a little underrated. So if the Shockers win or the Aftershocks win in round one, they'll get some sort of AAC crossover in that second game, which is sort of fun. And then there's a UNLV alumni team, and then you've got all the other variety of mixes and match players that you see in this tournament that always gets pretty interesting. This is as good a mix as I can remember, Tommy, with as much appeal, I think. And I haven't looked at the Memphis roster yet. They would have some star power potential over the years, but this is going to be a blast, mostly because you get the three schools back in this. I don't think that's happened since the first year of this tournament. And I think with the KU roster looking like it's going to look, which is sort of loaded, we're going to see a very well-attended event here because we know the Aftershocks draw a crowd. We know Purple and Black draws a crowd. Now you mix KU back into that. It's going to be pretty fun at Charles Koch Arena.
Yeah, I just want to know if I can bet on the TBT and where I can find odds. I don't know if that's available or not, but
I would imagine that we can. I don't know how that will look with the Elam ending. I wonder how that does.
Yeah,
that's what I'll be curious to see.
Yeah, it's a fun event, and it's one of those events that I know at first when it was like when it first came around and they announced they were doing the Elam ending. I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's going to be different. I don't know if it's going to work. Now it works. I think it works really well, and it makes it super exciting down to the very end of every single game. And I'm glad that it's back in Wichita. I'm definitely, I have not had a chance to actually go and be there in person for any of it up to this point, anytime it's been in Wichita.
Incredible.
So I would like to go and be able to experience it this season.
It's incredible. I've been a lot, and the atmosphere is great. And I'm just telling you right now, the Elam ending is better than the way we end basketball games currently. Like, it is better. It almost guarantees an exciting ending. Even if the game isn't ultra close, the fact that you're counting down to a score that you have to reach, even in that, and there's almost never blowouts because of that factor, but it is such a better way to end a basketball game, and you get great endings time and time again. I hope that someday and I believe they played it in the All-Star game. We had the inventor of that on last year. Were you here yet, Tommy, when we had him in?
No, I was not.
Yeah, so we had him in last year. To sort of talk about it, and the All-Star game used it. And so it is getting some exposure. And I'm like, the more people see it, the more people are going to like it, because there's nothing worse than timeouts and fouling at the end of the game, right? Like, it's just like, oh my God, we're just going to slog down the end of this thing. And you just basically you play not to lose by shooting free throws. No, the Elam ending guarantees you play to win, right? There is nothing holding you back at the end of a basketball game. And that's great. And it's incredible. And if there is some magical comeback, it's kind of like baseball. There's no time limit on that comeback. Like,
right.
If you keep defending, you could come all the way back in theory. So It's good.
We got to try to find some access to this event next month. I'd love to go. I've never been. So it would be, I've watched, a lot of the games on TV when they've televised the championships and all of that. But I've not had a chance to actually see it in person. So that'd be a lot of fun.
So they've got it staggered. We will get the three teams. So Mass Street will play on the first night at an 8:00 tip, and then Purple and Black and the Aftershocks will go back to back on the next night at 6 and 8. So, I mean, this is all very intentional, obviously. And by the way, you have that game, those games on Thursday featuring the K-State and Wichita State teams. Those will be on ESPN too. The KU initial game will be on ESPN Plus. The thing that has to happen is our alumni teams here have to win their games, because you're not going to get a matchup of those until potentially the third round would be the potential Aftershocks Purple and Black matchup. And then KU with the Mass Street, they're on the other side. So you'd have to get all the way into those quarterfinals to get there with them. So they're going to have to win some games to make it happen, which we know is tough to do in this tournament. That's why we like the Aftershocks, because they've learned how to do it in recent years, but that's coming up later next month. Obviously, we'll have more to talk about with that. We'll try and get in some of these coaches and other people to talk about the tournament, but couldn't be a more exciting bracket reveal, I don't think. 869-1240, the number to call. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network today here on KFH as Sports Daily rolls on. All right, everybody, we appreciate it. Congratulations to our Win Surge ticket winners, to our HDO winners as well. Thanks to Tim Fitzgerald. Thanks to Chelsea Messenger. The IHOP hotline will be back open tomorrow, 869-1240, as we wrap up the week. So much NBA draft content for you tomorrow as we react to everything. Jim Rome coming up at 11, Bob and Jeff at 2, Maggie and Perloff at 4. A quick Zach Gelb hit before the Royals take on McClanahan as those heavy underdogs. Chelsea told us about that. Pregame coverage begins at 5:30. For Tommy Castor and Jad Chambers, I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll wrap it up for the week tomorrow. Thank you, Jad.